Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this again.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness, my pleasure. Thank
this
you.
is like part 3 of this conversation that we've been having for the past couple of months now. So I'm going to read your statement just as a little introduction for those who either didn't see your work when it was at the Carberry Gallery on the campus back in October 2017, but working primarily in oil paint, Joanne Holtje often uses the landscape, at times highly abstracted, as a means to express emotional content. Because of her self-guided training, emphasized exploration and expansion, she moves fluidly between aesthetics, always honoring her intuitive process. Since 2006, she has exhibited in a wide range of venues, including the Fitchburg Art Museum, the Danforth Museum, and the Painting Center Gallery in New York City. Her work appears in the book Creating Abstract Art by Dean Nimmer. Joanne now lives, works, and draws inspiration from the Pioneer Valley, where she has been a member of the Oxbow Gallery in Northampton since 2017. So,
17?
I'm sorry, 2014.
There you go.
2014, sorry.
The one date I know.
2014, excuse me. But we were lucky enough to have your work at Springfield Technical Community College back in 2017. And one of the reasons that we're having this conversation in the way that we are is because we have to do this social distancing thing here in the fall of 2020. And one of the things that I've been interested in as the gallery director, coordinator person, is the impact that some current events, civil events, political events, pandemic events have had on artists. So that was one of the impetuses for this conversation. But before we get into that, I would like to start with your origin story around art. So, do you remember when you first thought you were an artist?
It's interesting because I really I resisted that label for a long time. And people would say, "Oh, you're an artist, or you're the artist," and I'd be like, "No, I just make stuff." Because I was not that like kid in school. Like if you went back and asked all of my elementary, junior high, and high school art teachers, who are the 20 kids that are most likely still making art at 57, none of them would have mentioned me. I was not the kid that like drew the backdrops for the school plays or, designed the yearbook. None of that. Nuh-uh. I have, however, always been just really driven to be expressive and creative. And that came out in a lot of different ways. And I sang and I acted and I wanted to be Carol Burnett, for goodness sakes. She was like, she was all that. And it really wasn't till later, like the end of college and after college, that I really started to play with visual art. And I didn't like take to it like a genius or anything like that by any stretch. But it definitely held my attention. And I started taking like classes here and there. In my mid-20s, I started doing figure modeling at a number of different schools. I was living in the more in towards the Boston area at that time. And so I was in many ways just sort of like a sponge, taking up all the information that these drawing teachers were offering their students, or sculpting in some cases. And one of the places that I modeled would you could, in addition to getting paid, you were accrued credits towards a free class.
Oh,
So I started taking classes at a place where they no longer offer classes, but at De Cordova Sculpture Park and Museum.
Yep.
And that's really how I built my education. At first, it was very much around figure drawing. I was very interested in that, coming out of sort of more performance type work, dance and whatnot. I sort of understood through my body, and I don't know, just seemed like the thing to do. I really was so clueless about how one becomes an artist. And I also from around, early 20s, just found myself really interested in oil paint and just really taught myself oil paint. I got a book on techniques of the old masters, which is pretty funny if you look at my paintings nowadays, but it was like making my own Damar varnish and, everything, cooking rabbit skin glue and, and I was really just, and it's very much how I am. I'm not someone who's going to go and follow someone else's program, no matter what the topic is. I always have to invent the wheel myself, which is a really slow and kind of dumb way to learn a lot of things, but it's a really great way to learn art, because I never had to go through that period of unlearning, what so-and-so, beat into me. Everything came about very organically for me. And I guess in answer to your question, the first time that the light bulb went on wasn't until 2006. The first time I submitted a piece.
So much more recent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Because it was the first time I didn't know that there were these things called juried shows. What? I don't know. And it was the first time I heard of that. It was Concord Art Association. And oh gosh, now his name's escaping me. He's a gallerist in Boston, heavy towards photography. Anyway, he was the juror, and I was like, oh, sure, I'll throw some drawings in.
Yeah, yeah.
And a piece got in, and I was like, oh, cool. And then I went to the show, and I was like, oh my god,
yeah.
This is like with really good art. And I was the last to know.
Well, your art is really good as well, so that's why it was there. Right? I mean, It wasn't just like it didn't drop off the back of a truck and find its way, it was chosen for a reason.
Oh yeah, no, I still have it hanging in my house, actually. Wow. I still like it.
Great. That's great. So that's a very interesting origin story. Because for some people, they'll say like, when I was 10 years old,
right,
something happened, or but
and I wasn't in a family that took me to museums. I can remember the first time I ever went to a museum, which was in junior high school. I took a little, they called the mini course in art history, and we went to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and that was the first time I ever stepped foot in an art museum. I didn't know. I had an artistic sister. It wasn't me. Yeah.
That's
but
great.
It's fine. And
well, and also, it's not just, and I know this from having so many conversations with you and seeing so much of your work. It's not just taking art classes that makes one an artist. Right. I mean, because you were talking about I got a book on technique. And so then I started making my own, varnishes, and, experimenting in that way. So the technique is important. And also understanding art history, equally important, right? What has happened before you're able to then stand on the shoulders of those others
Mhm.
and maybe do something different, or to copy something, or to appropriate something so
Mhm.
that you can understand better a better technique, or
Yep.
but also life, like that life can just
Yeah.
either inform or push or pull you in different directions. Is there you know you were mentioning about starting out in figure drawing. Is there a time when the materials that you chose were really driving more of a driving force than, say, the subject that you were?
For sure. Yeah. Um, Let me think about, put this sort of in the context of time. This would have been about 14, 15 years ago, is when I moved to central Massachusetts. And I started taking courses pretty regularly at the Worcester Art Museum,
Hmm.
which again, I think they had a bigger program than they have now.
Hmm.
And I just, I like, kind of my mind went kablooey. I was doing sculpture and I was doing painting and I was doing photography and earth stuff. And, I was like all over the board. And it was great
Hmm.
and exciting. But at one point I was like, you are not 20. And if you want to become proficient,
Hmm.
you better pick one thing because it's just too much.
Hmm.
Although I really do enjoy that. And I still, actually right now I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should go do some three-dimensional work for a while or something and just like shake things up.
Hmm.
But, and I just was like, oh, oil. I just have always come back to oil.
Hmm.
Let me really focus on that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in doing that, in particularly using the solid oil sticks,
Hmm.
um, the material really spoke to me. And there's a spontaneity in it and kind of a lack of control for me anyway in it that opened things up and definitely pushed things further into abstraction. And I really, I don't know. I just found the texture and the viscosity of the material just was really exciting to me and became a very important element in the work. It's not just form and tone and color. There's a three-dimensional aspect and a matte to sheen aspect that is on equal par. It's
When
so
your work, when your
that was definitely.
oh, sorry, excuse me. When your work was at the Carberry, I do remember there being these debates among students, as to what they were seeing, because there was a lot of paint, in some cases, right? There was a lot of paint on the paintings, in some cases. Some of your paintings for that show were very large, very, very large paintings. Um, and some of them were smaller.
Mhm.
But I found that sometimes students thought they could see something,
Mhm.
that there was like, oh, wait a minute, I think I see the head of something, something, like that
Yeah,
there was these,
yeah, yeah.
debates that would go on. Does that ever bother you that like people see things that you didn't intend to be in the work? Or, like you're like, this is abstract. This is just supposed to be about my love of paint and color. And sometimes they read all of this other stuff into it.
I actually find it really interesting, and I only get frustrated when people try to put what they see on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remind, if I'm within earshot, I remind them that the ink blot test isn't about the person who dropped the ink, you know.
Right, right.
And I think humans are just wired. Our visual cortex or whatever, we are wired to see things.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't see the woolly mammoth or, you know, the saber-toothed tiger in camouflage, you know, you were dinner. And so I think we are wired to recognize each other's faces. Oh, you're part of my, you know, little group and we're going to be okay. Or, oh, that's a stranger. I better go, you know, sharpen my spear or whatever, you know. It's like, that's how we're wired, and it's there for a good reason. But we are conscious beings, so we can choose how much credibility we give that.
Yeah.
And I worked for years designing like flower gardens for people. And some people who have a difficult time looking at abstract art, I try to draw the analogy to looking at a garden. It's like, you don't stand in front of a garden and go, well, what does this mean? What was the gardener trying to say? Or, well, I don't know the names of these plants, so I can't enjoy them. It's like, nobody does that. They just step into a garden and go, oh my God, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Enjoy it, you know, just allow yourself to have a visual sensory experience and kind of get over it, you know. Like you can quiet the analytical part of your brain if you choose to once in a while.
So when we're looking at the painting Hugging the Coast, okay, more recent painting, so not this year, but, you know, 2019, would you say that's the landscape painting, or is that an abstract landscape painting, or is that just abstract? Well, like, well, you know, this is what I'm getting at. One of the things that I really enjoy about your work is that you ride sometimes a very fine line, you know, and again, going back to the Carberry show, which was a solo show, you know, not everything was abstract.
Right.
And there was some landscape, and there was, you know, and so as a viewer, you had to sort of navigate that, you know, what does Joanne want me to see, and what am I seeing, you know, line. But with something like Hugging the Coast, how do you see it? How do you see that?
Doesn't matter how I see it. I would say, first of all,
this is about you.
You know, I see my paintings all have their own history. And that painting started out as something very different. And it was most definitely a landscape painting. I had done first a smallish painting, I don't know, size painting,
20 by 16.
Yeah, something like that, of these mountains, like a view of, there's trees and there's mountains in the distance, and I liked it, but I really wanted it for it to be looser and more abstract. I'm like, well, you know, I just got to get it bigger. So then I got a little bit bigger, you know, like 36 by something or other, and did it again. It was like, well, that's okay too, but I really want to get more abstract with this, because it's really hard when you have, for me, super hard to have a picture of something real in my head and then make it abstract.
Okay.
That's complicated for me. Even more complicated if I'm like actually looking at a landscape and try to make it totally abstract. Haven't quite gotten there yet. I will. And so I moved up in scale to Hugging the Coast, and
which is how big? Is that like 40 by?
It is.
It's pretty big.
56 by 46.
56 by 46.
And I painted this whole thing. There were mountains, there were trees, there's this, there was that. It was loose, it had some beautiful passages, but I just kept like going, it's not quite what I want.
Uh-huh.
And I finally was like, I just have to let this image just totally go.
Mm-hmm.
And there are pieces of the original painting showing through. There's no mountains in there. Definitely no mountains. And I really wanted to push myself. I admire a lot of paintings that have like big swaths of one color. I mean, that just seems so bold and confident. Whereas I like getting into these little mushy places where this color and this brushstroke and that brushstroke, which is great, but it's like sometimes it feels too fussy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted something like,
Yeah.
and so that's what I was going for.
Oh, okay.
So it's got a lot of blue
Yes,
and a lot of green.
Like 3/4 of it is blue. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it evolved into it's how it is now.
Yeah.
And so for me, I do see landscape in there. Again, largely my long-winded story, because it started out as a very, very much more a landscape.
Yeah.
But I think, as I may have might have touched on earlier in our conversation, for me, it plays with perspective, which is something I enjoy doing, where I feel like I am at once providing an aerial view, but then there's also horizon. So it's like you're kind of going, woo. Yeah. So I think when you put a horizontal line across the canvas, almost anyone is going to be into that as landscape.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to another painting, which also, because I want to speak to what we're all living through right now, what you're living through specifically, as an artist. We are in 2020. And it has been an incredibly challenging year. There's been a lot going on. It's pick your poison, pandemic, politics, civil unrest, election, there's just so environment. Oh, yes, thank you.
Remember there was fires at one point?
There was, yes, California ice burning. There's been a lot going on, and the year is not done yet. Almost, but not yet. And I don't know that it's going to change much, just that, we changed the date. But I wonder for you, how has being an artist, like, I don't want to say like helped you, cope with everything, because, then goes into like that art therapy thing. And, and I'm not suggesting that, but like, how do you use your art during a year like this? Or does your art use you?
Yeah. Well, I certainly know that there are artists out there that this has been a very fruitful year for them, because they have had to, there are fewer distractions. They have had to cut down on the socializing, cut down on everything. And so they're just sort of focused in. I'm not one of those artists. It's been a really challenging year. I've had a really hard time being productive. And I have made some paintings. I mean, George Floyd, for example, that I'm super proud of, and I think we're very successful, but it's been very sporadic. And, lately with the leading up to the election, I kind of just didn't want to leave the couch, honestly. And I've busied myself with yard work and things like that. And it's November, so it's getting dark early, and before you know it, it's time to start thinking about dinner. And I really have sort of struggled and floundered, and I just keep telling myself it's okay. It's not going to go away. It'll still be there when you're ready. And, just this morning I was like, yeah, I need to make a schedule. I need to say,
Mhm.
these are my studio days, and I need to just go there at a reasonable hour and be there for a number of hours. And we'll see what happens when I'm there. But it's been rough. I'll
Mhm.
be frank.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry to hear it's been rough, but it's been. I mean, I feel like no one is immune, regardless of outlets or inspiration or lack of inspirations. It's been a challenge for everybody.
Yeah, it's hard. I have learned that it's become a little hard for me to make when I'm not so sure when anyone will be able to see it. Um,
Well, when you and I did a recording back in I don't know, late
August, maybe
September. No, it was September. It was September.
September.
You had work at the Oxbow Gallery.
Yep.
And I think the Oxbow had just reopened, but very limited, very, very limited
Yep.
hours.
Yep.
And we were doing our social distancing. I think we did the whole interview with our masks on, but and you were kind enough to do that interview in the gallery, and there was work on the walls, which was great to see. I felt like, oh my God, I'm having
Yeah.
I haven't seen art on walls in
Yeah.
months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that was really encouraging. And then we also went to your studio,
Mm-hmm.
and you have work that you've done this year. It's not that it's been a totally
Yeah.
dry year, but do you, I mean, with the piece like George Floyd, which you say like, hey, that was like something that came out of a horrific event.
Oh, yeah.
A horrific event. Do you find that you respond that way typically, or is that like a different way of sort of absorbing the world and having it come out on a painting?
I think that was pretty unique, a pretty unique experience for me. I think the only other time I had anything like that happen was a little earlier in the year, or was that the end of 2019? Anyway, when the fires in Australia, what year was that?
I think that was 2019.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
Yeah.
One tragedy leads to another, and they're
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that was sort of towards the end of 2019, maybe. But anyway, so when that was happening, I started on a painting, or made a painting, sort of imagining or conjuring rain on these dry hills. And it's just like, it's a little bit of a compositionally strange painting, because it's almost divided in half, a square, almost divided in half, with like clouds and rain on one side and dry hills on the other. So that was like, like hoping I could make magic happen. you know? But no, I know that everything gets in. I'm a sponge, whether it's landscapes that I'm hiking through, or interpersonal stuff, or news stuff. All of it gets in, and I just never really know how it's going to ooze out.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to my next question, because at a time like this, it's such a challenging time. What function do you think art serves?
That's been a big question.
Well, as the creator, right? As the creator, you're saying like, hey, I'm struggling, and this is just like, but, and then we can't visit it. That's been the other thing. We haven't been able to go to galleries or museums for the most part. They've just started to maybe open in very limited ways. And then, there's the whole like, is that okay to do? Like feeling really unsure about that. So,
yep.
If we're still making art, and you are, but you're doing it in your studio at Holyoke, or you're doing it at home, and you have nowhere to show it, at the moment, what function does art serve then? Like,
Yeah.
does it have a function?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard because I feel very strongly that for me, it's like for me to complete the circle, the creative circle, it needs to get out in the world
Mm-hmm.
and seen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in just making paintings and like hiding them under my bed. And additionally, I feel really strongly about seeing art in person. It is entirely different experience. I mean, I can remember the first time I stood in front of a Van Gogh, right? I think anyone who's seen one in person can tell you I remember the first time, because you can feel his energy. And I don't care how great the photograph is, it's never gonna fully communicate texture,
Mm-hmm.
and definitely not the vibe that comes off of something that somebody has made with their whole being.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have not been very interested in doing online shows.
Yeah.
And I guess I just, and that's absolutely one of the things that has been a big speed bump for me and made it hard to work,
Mm-hmm.
is not knowing when I can get them out the door.
Yeah.
Um,
And you had a major show canceled during, right? Like,
yeah, postponed. Yeah.
or postponed. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I, at the Carberry, we've had to postpone as well and cancel too. I mean, and it's hard to know when things are going to be opening back up. When,
Nobody
again,
knows.
it's safe. When, how do you plan? As I do, most of our shows are planned years in advance, and suddenly, how do you plan for
Right. Right.
2021? Even looking further out to 2022, you're like, who knows?
Absolutely. And I think actually that's the reality of existence, is really,
Mhm.
we never know. We never know,
Right, right.
when that Mack truck is going to come, right? So it's just like 2020 is like in painting, there's something called glazing. It's a
Mhm.
very fine layer of transparent color that you put on, and it makes things pop.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that is kind of like 2020. It's just been like this incredible glaze that just has made everything so much more heightened.
Mhm.
And that we have to deal with the fact that we're not in control, and we can't really, you can make plans, but you have to go with what comes. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's been a little bit of a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah. For us all.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
us all. Is there anything? I mean, on that note, I kind of feel like that's a good place to wrap things up. But I wanted to offer you the last word. Like, if you feel like there's anything else that you can say, about being an artist right now, that um,
Hmm.
yeah, like that. Is there any
Well,
other?
I think um, the act of making art is, I think it's a very affirmative act. It is an act of acknowledging the individual,
Mhm.
the uniqueness of an individual's life, and the universal nature of the things that we grapple with in
Mhm.
this life.
Mhm.
And that's not going to go in and out of fashion.
Mhm.
And if ever there was a time for people to look deeply within,
Yeah.
and to be as authentic as they dare.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is the time.
Mm. Mm.
You know, it's like the prophets didn't show up in the Bible when things were going great. It was like when there was a famine, or, you know, it's like, this is the time. This is the time
Yeah.
for the voice in the wilderness.
Mm. All right. Well, with that, Joanne, I want to thank you so much
Mm.
for being so honest and thoughtful and transparent with where you're at in this world, the art world, the world in general. But I just want to thank you, and I hope,
Mm.
you know, as we all do, that things will, you know, we will get through this, and there will be an after time, right? You know, we talk about the before times. You know, there will be an after time when we can look back on this and say, wow, you know.
Yep.
But you know, those shows will come back. You know,
Yep.
and art is still being created,
Yep.
because you know you're still creating art. So I thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you. It definitely is a little, you know, updraft to have something like this come along. I appreciate it.
We all need some updraft.
Yeah. Yeah.
All need some updraft, and also the connection. You know, just connecting in this way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And George is in Springfield right now at the Fine Arts Museum through January.
Oh wow. Okay. And they are open.
They are open.
Limited out.
They want people to get tickets in advance so that they can.
Yes. Yes. But I have been there on a Tuesday
Yep.
afternoon, and I have been, my son and I have been the only ones in the gallery. So it's actually, you know, the bad side, but the good side is there's no crowds.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to hear your work is on the walls there too. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Sandra.